Can you see my thumb there? Well, more than 2 weeks ago, I was at an event and I was being served food. The girl that served me the food on a plate, obviously it wasn't hot, her side of the plate, but when I took it off her, immediately I put it on the table and my thumb became a blister. It was incredibly hot. What must have happened in the kitchen is that that side of the plate was under an extreme heat source. And 2 weeks plus later, I've still got the mark there on my thumb. Now, for me, this is just one of these things. I laughed about it. These things happen. But of course, we live in a society now where some people would pursue that and try and make some money out of it, because that's the sort of culture that we live in, a blame culture. But it hasn't always been like that. When I grew up, I remember in primary school going away with the school, the class certainly, to Edinburgh for a holiday. And I remember very clearly coming out the hotel. We were on a hill and it was a tremendous view, and you could see right across to the Firth of Forth. And it was a fascinating sight for a young boy in Scotland for the very first time. And as I was looking across the scenery, I walked into a lamppost and I had a black eye. And immediately, like my thumb, the eye responded. And the teacher said to me, "You need to watch where you're going." And when I telephoned my mum and dad that evening, tell them how things were going, well, they said the same as well. That's what it used to be like in those days. If someone tripped over a paving slab, people would say to you, "You need to watch your step. You need to watch where you're going." Now it's, "Who can I sue?" And that, unfortunately for me, is the culture that we live in. But that blame element doesn't stay with a paving slab or a lamppost or a thumb or whatever it is that we can make some money out of. That blame culture also extends to our character, to our personality, to who we are. And we now live ever increasingly in a world where it's always someone else's fault. Whatever happens, it's always on someone else's shoulders, the blame. You can imagine you work in an office and someone comes in the morning and they start telling everyone about the idiot that they've just encountered on the road, and they tell you the story. And like every story that people tell, it's always the fault of the other person. Well, 5 miles across town, in another office, in an identical situation, there's another person arriving there telling all their colleagues about the idiot that they've just encountered on the road. And again, a different story. The blame is on the other person, until we actually come to a point in life when we realize that sometimes it might be our fault. It might not always be the fault of the other person. Until we come to that point, we'll never progress as an individual. We'll never grow. We'll never develop strong roots in the life in which we live, because as long as it's always someone else's fault, the spotlight is not on us. We're not being challenged. We're not being uncomfortable when we look at ourselves and see that perhaps we're not as perfect as we would like to make out or think that we are. Don't always put the blame on someone else. Look at your own life. Look at your own circumstances and accept that sometimes, very often, more often than not, the situation, the conflict, the issues, the circumstances that are going on, it might not always be the fault of the other person.